Call the meeting of County Council to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us pray. We are here tonight to govern the people who have entrusted us with their one vote for many, to vote for them as they feel government should be, which is truly for liberty and justice. We are assigned to a humble service, which is the duty of us all. We are called to respect and support one another through truth and honesty. As we travel the road towards the future, may we be attentive and not distracted. Let us not be a people of divided heart. May our priorities be for the good, and our vision be focused on our duties. Give us strength and courage to do what is right. We ask this in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Mr. Smith, roll call, please.
Mr. Anderson,
Here.
Mrs. Fatika,
Here.
Mr. Horton,
Here.
Mrs. Law,
Here,
Mr. Leone,
Here.
Mr. Rastetter,
Here.
Dr. Faust.
Here. Hearing of the public, all those that called in ahead of time will have 5 minutes. Anybody thereafter who wishes to speak would have 3. Mr. Barnes called in tonight, so if you want to come forward.
I do apologize, I can't keep up with what everybody's doing on their daytime job, but I'll try. I want to talk tonight about this Greater Erie County Gaming Authority revenue, you know what it is. But I want to talk about it a little bit, because I've heard recently about how they send you reports. Well, so did the GEIDC, and you had representatives at the GEIDC. But unless someone understands, cares to look into the reports, we get where we're to the point where we lose $3, $4, $5 million, like we did the GEIDC, because people weren't looking at the reports, right? I was like the canary in the coal mine. I can remember being down here, meeting after meeting after meeting, talking about the inland port and muskrat minerals and all these things. I can remember being down here, not in this meeting room, but the study session, where the attorney for the GEIDC and a respected businessman in Erie guaranteed you all that money would be paid back. It was less than a year, they were bankrupt. So, I think from after looking at this Erie County Gaming Revenue Authority, I think there has to be some changes, and I'm not sure if it's the board or the director, or all of the above, I think. Because I started looking last year for 6 months, January to June, and I started looking at where was the money spent. So I started looking at, there's a checks to Amanda Burlingham. January, February, March, April, May, June, $24,000, $24,512 to Amanda Burlingham. I think, well, who is Amanda Burlingham? Well, she's a public relations person. She's there to tell us how good things are in Erie. Forget the fact that we're one of the worst places in America for black people. She's telling us how good we are for $24,000. I thought, well, okay. Well, maybe she had to tell us how Parker Phillips, at the same time, received $49,500 to cut and paste a report to tell us how good Erie County Gaming Revenue Authority is. So $49,000 and $24,000. Like $74,000 spent out of our tax money. What is all 7 of you have to decide what your tolerance is for misuse of tax dollars. You have to decide, is it 5,000? Is it 10,000? Is it 50,000? Is it $1 million? What is your tolerance? Because obviously right now the tolerance, it isn't $5,000. Because as I talked one time when I was down here, I talked about Perry Wood, check number 2055, fall tuition, February reimbursement, $5,604 in March 8, 2017. And we were told no more tuition reimbursement. We aren't going to pay this man for his doctorate out of taxpayers' money. So then the very next month, within 7 weeks, we get a check to Mr. Wood, check number 2138, for $5,527. Well, what do you think that was? Well, it wasn't tuition reimbursement, because we aren't doing that anymore. It was professional development. So all of you up here, 7 of you are okay with deceiving the public, changing 2 words for $5,527. You're okay with that. I'm all right with that. We just all are under a complete understanding that the 7 of you are cool with that $5,000 expense, because that's not the level of where you think you should get involved and see a change. You know what bothered me a whole lot, and I'd have to ask the purchasing department down here in the county, if they spend much at the country fair or get-go on office supplies. Because if you're not, you may be missing out. And the reason why I say that is April 3rd, $3.49, get-go office supplies. Starbucks, $3.13 a meeting. Here we go. Starbucks, $3.13 a meeting. How about Country Fair, of course up by $3.09 office supplies. What do we buy in a Country Fair and get-go office? When I think of office supplies, get-go and Country Fair don't come to mind, at least when I'm in there. Oh, here's one. Well, they actually did go to Office Max, $9.74 office supplies. But if we look through these, it's just crazy that $3.13 at the Starbucks store. Well, here
Randy,
was,
thank you. Your time has expired.
Don't I get 5? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, you do get 5. I wouldn't short you 1 second, Randy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wasn't paying attention. A lot of good stuff. We can continue next month. Now, probably be in.
Have a good evening.
next month. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public wish to be heard tonight? Good timing. Step right up if you like.
Yes, sir.
If you could, just give us your name and the municipality you live in, and you have 3 minutes.
He's Erie, Pennsylvania. One of the things I'd like to speak with is about the MPO has said that with the new $5 funding that they were going to be looking at bridges that were structurally deficient and obsolete. And I just wanted to remind County Council that we do have a bridge that probably isn't on that list, but that is exactly how it was classified. The McBride Viaduct as being structurally deficient and obsolete. And so one of the things I would ask is that you give that a consideration as to how those funds are applied, because there's a benefit here, because there's already over $1 million in refundable money to the municipality in charge that can be used to help fix this structure. So it would go a lot further than trying to start to fix another structure with the seed money that you're going to be getting from the $5. And the other thing I'd like to speak about the LERTA expansion. I just believe that I'm against the expansion to the Bayfront, because I don't believe that it will serve the city or the school districts, which are having financial problems. And that's an incredible sum of money to defer, with the properties being completely, once they've been completely done, you know, they should generate $6 million each in tax money. And so if you look at that over 10 years, you're talking about over $100 million. And the city would have to literally expand into Fairview in order to have a building to go at that pace to refund the $100 million that we're giving away. And so it just really, there's not that much property left in the city. So it's really not a good plan, and there's no way that we'll recoup that money. I mean, I don't know if anyone's done the projections, but that's enough money to run our city government for more than a year. And so I just want you to think about that, and think about the city, think about the city residents. I understand that the county at large is better financially,
Michael, thank you. Your time has expired.
Thank
Right.
Thank you.
you.
Seeing no one come forward, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from December 4th and December 13th meetings? Moved by Mr. Leone and seconded by Mr. Horton. Is there any corrections or comments regarding those meetings? Mr. Smith, roll call, please.
On the minutes, Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. Leone,
Yes.
Mrs. Law,
Yes.
Mr. Rastetter,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes. Reports of county officials, the county executive or her designee, Mr. Horton, or I'm sorry, Mr. Lee.
Evening, Council. I'm here to provide an update on the Erie County Community Application with the State Board of Education. Councilman Horton had asked administration if we could come down and provide an update, and again, that's why I'm here. Just to do a brief overview of how we even got here. On June 30th, 2017, the county administration submitted an application down to the State Board of Education for consideration for a standalone community college in Erie County. On December 19th, 2017, the special committee provided feedback to the administration in the way of a 5-page response requesting additional information. The additional information was prepared in conjunction with the administration as well as Empower Erie. We had formed a partnership early on with Empower Erie to work as a project manager along with the county. The county served as a project administrator on this particular project. On February 16th, 2018, the administration submitted a supplemental information report back to the State Board of Education in the way of a 30-page response. We were told that if there were any questions or concerns, they would be in touch with us. The administration has continued to reach out to the State Board of Education to find out what is the status of our application. We reached out several times to Karen Mochek, who's the executive director for the State Board of Education. She shared with us that it would not be on the agenda for September. So the administration asked the question, could they possibly provide a new timeline for us? Last week, the Department of Education reached out to the administration, and I spoke with a gentleman by the name of Mr. Michael Potts, who is the Pennsylvania Higher Education Associate. And he shared with me that he would like to set up a phone conference call with myself to kind of go over some of the key areas of the plan and some of the questions that they had in reference to the plan. That call took place on not yesterday, but on this past Friday. Michael and I spoke, and one of the areas that he had questions on, he and his team, was the financial section. He shared that in the financial section, he feels that the county application is a little aggressive based on the rollout of the programs. We have a total of 30 programs that we are rolling out over a 5-year period. They're associate degree programs, but 15 of those programs are rolled out in the first year. So he wanted to have an additional discussion with me and my financial team to go over the rollout of those particular degree programs. We're going to be having a teleconference with Mr. Potts on tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. And at that time, we're going to go over the particular programs that we have in the plan and prioritize. So this is where we currently are. From the outset, the state had shared with us that it was going to be between a 12-month to an 18-month process. We were hoping more towards the 12-month timeline. 12 months has come and gone. So we are hopefully we'll make it within 18 months. And I would be remiss if I didn't share that this is the state as far as approving or reviewing applications as it pertains to community colleges. This is the first time they have done this in 25 years. The last time they did this was back in 1993 in Greene County. That is when they approved an application. So in all fairness to them, they are new to this process as far as with the team. So we're looking to continue on as far as with our talks with the state and hopefully for a favorable outcome. Are there any questions, Mr. Chairman?
Remember, we usually don't do a Q&A, but go ahead.
No, it's not a question. Well, I guess it is. After you meet with them on the financials, would you share that information with this body?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Gary, how is the partnership with Empower Erie continuing moving forward, and are members of Empower Erie a part of your, what you call finance team, and will they be on the call?
Yes. Yes, Empower Erie is still part of our review and part of our team as we get additional information for the State Board of Education. And yes, they will be on the call on tomorrow.
Anybody
Thank you,
else?
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you.
Okay, Finance Committee, Mrs. Fatika.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee met on Thursday, September 13th, and we agreed to put forward items A through E on tonight's agenda. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Personnel Committee, Mr. Horton.
Sure. And Personnel Committee met also last Thursday. We had basically one item for tonight's meeting. That concludes my report.
Mrs. Fatika.
I'm putting on my public health hat, and I'm asking my colleagues and all of you and your family and friends to get your flu shot. If you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for your coworkers, friends, and family. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Fatika. Next is Mr. Leon.
Maybe I am misunderstanding what ECRA or some council members are indicating. I heard the solicitor for ECRA indicate that we can hold back the funding for ECRA's restricted funds. This was never the intent of this ordinance. We expect ECRA to follow guidelines that are used in the grants to other organizations as far as their expenses are concerned. Some of the issues that I'm concerned with include payment to the Pennsylvania Society Association. What benefits are derived from this? The Ridge Group payments on a monthly basis. They indicate they are lobbying for them. Lobbying for what? ECRA is a grant organization and funding comes from gaming revenues. What benefits come from the Ridge Group? None. They just paid $9,000 by credit card to this organization, by credit card. 2 checks were made out for reimbursement to Perry Wood for a doctoral degree. One check was made out for $58,0438 on March 8th for fall tuition reimbursement. A second check was made out for I think it was 55 something. I have the wrong amount here. I didn't check that. But it's $5,500, and the total of those 2 checks come to $11,331.38 of gaming revenue tax dollars. The first check was for tuition reimbursement. In an effort to hide this, the second check was written for personal development. This, I agree, was a plan to deceive the public, including council and some members of the ECRA board. Nowhere in the minutes of their meeting is this present. How did it happen? We don't really know what happened in that particular area, but do we need someone that has a doctoral degree to pass out grant checks? Food for ECRA for 2017, in my estimation, approximated $38,000. They not only give grant checks, but they give presents and food to these recipients. We were highly critical of JCAC that spent $35,000 on food. Why aren't we critical of ECRA? This is what the ordinance is all about. There are other areas I will cover later after reviewing other minutes of their meetings. No one is saying we are going to stop their funding. As one member of this council, I feel we need to be aware of their actions, and I believe this ordinance that also applies to grants to other organizations needs to be passed. Any questions on that, I'd be glad to answer them. At the council caucus, 2 issues were ones that caught my attention. The first was Mr. Horton's comment about first readings becoming second readings. I can understand when it's an emergency. However, I agree with him because by our always going for second reading, it presents a few problems. It doesn't give the citizenry any opportunity to review the issue or make any comments about it. It makes this administration and council very complacent. The administration can ask for second readings and usually gets it. We need to make sure of when they were aware of the situation for the ordinance and if they had time to present it earlier. Again, I agree with Andre Horton that we should not, just for the sake of expediency, make second readings. During the caucus, I indicated that I attended a meeting about the first ordinance that was passed by council where ECRA was concerned. I heard our chairman indicate that because he was the liaison to the ECRA, he should have been informed. Meaning no disrespect toward the chairman or any other member of this council, to me, it felt that the innuendo I should not have been there. Let me make myself very clear. Not the chairman or any member of this council can dictate what I can or cannot do. I'm not elected by the chairman or any member of this council. I don't need anyone to say to me that I can or can't go to any meeting I want to. I am elected by my constituents and not by any other individuals. They are my first concern. If they feel I'm not doing my job, they'll vote me out. Again, I'm not anyone's patsy. I will do what I think is right. I will not compromise my principles for anyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Leone. Next is Mr. Horton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to first state that I'm not against LRTA, as I believe that tax abatements in certain instances, when applied right, do spurn economic development. But being aware of the LRTA law and that it specifically speaks to blighted areas, I fail to see where anything north of the Bayfront Highway should be LRTA certified. I fail to see that where any areas there where blight doesn't exist, and certainly we have enough blight in the city of Erie, where we don't have to go looking for more. I think that those areas should not be 10-year tax exempt either. I think if you fall into the under the guidelines of the state LRTA law as it's written, then I think there are wonderful, excellent opportunities to use the LRTA law in the way that it's intended. Right now, as it stands, there seems to be a lot of rising support for a citywide LRTA, and I don't believe that the citizens, I know my constituents, who are going to be immediately affected by it in a way that probably none of the other 6 districts are, in that it's the epicenter of the Erie Refocus, or City of Erie Comprehensive Plan, where there's some really, really wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things taking place. Saddens me that poor people are being left behind. I've yet to hear anyone from the city or the county planning or from the state Department of Community Economic Development or any of the nonprofits tell me what the plan is for poor people who are being displaced under the Erie Refocus Plan. And so when I think of Leo Towers, Schmidt Towers, Methodist Towers, Richford Arms, Friendship Towers, poor and disabled, underserved people, when those buildings are purchased by EDDC, what happens to those people? What happens to the affordable housing in those areas? I mean, I can come talk about gentrification ad nauseum, but rather try to offer up solutions. And so I've tried to do that on several occasions, but every now and again you simply still have to highlight things. And so I highlight once again, it's been 319 days since the 24 Wall Street USA Today article came out citing Erie, Pennsylvania as the worst city in America for African Americans to live or thrive. 47% of African Americans, city of Erie, unemployed, 2 times the national average. We're still having dialogue about a community college. I pick up tonight's agenda and I sorry I missed last month's meeting, but I reviewed that agenda, followed the city council meeting. I see nothing on tonight's agenda that addresses poor people or that would mitigate that 24/7 article. And we can argue about methodology and all of that, but I think pretty much everyone knows that poor people are doing bad, and least amongst those are African Americans, many who live in the targeted refocus area. And they're not homeowners, they're renters who will, when the market-based housing is ramped up, will not be able to afford to stay in areas that perhaps their families have been in for centuries, certainly for decades. And so I'm going to go back, and I'll come back and I'll be prepared to offer up. I've sent up some things to the administration to offer up a solution, or somewhat, not a solution to the total problem, but a variable. I feel that raising or lowering the requirement age for the summer jobs program to 15 would be a great start. It's just one of the things, and there are other things that I'll propose moving forward. So tonight, specifically, as it relates to liaisonships as well, since my colleague brought it up, we have a crisis with the EMTA situation, and I am the liaison for EMTA, and I wouldn't suggest or be opposed to anyone meeting with anyone on anything at any time, as long as you don't violate the Sunshine Act. I think conversation and communication only lends itself to better outcomes. But I haven't had any conversations, and the information that I'm getting about the EMTA situation, I'm getting from the Erie Times, and I don't think that's right. And so I did send a letter up asking the administration for a meeting or sit down so that we can kind of discuss. And we don't have to get secondhand information from Matt or Pat. And finally, there's appointments, always appointments coming down. I arrived here in 2014, and to date there's been 228 total appointments. There were 31 in 2014, all approved. There were 47 in 2015, all approved. 2016, there were 56. One of my colleagues tabled 2. He didn't bring it back because one of the appointments were a county employee, and we had just implemented that you cannot be a county employee and serve on a board or authority. And so he removed his 2. We had 38 in 2017. That same individual who removed them brought those 2 back, and they both were approved. We also tabled 3 in 2017, and 1 failed, and they were all due to one of our colleagues who had not sought re-election. He wanted to appoint 3 or 4 people at the end of his term, and he only had, I think 30 days left in his term, and we didn't think that was right. So in 2018, there were 56 total appointments as of 9/13/18. I pulled one was pulled back because of a county, and being a county employment, not eligible for appointment. 1 failed. So the 1 failed was the Erie County Planning Commission. and we've been here before. Erie County Planning Commission submitted their bylaws, which are in direct conflict or contradiction of our form of government, the Home Rule Charter. This body, majority of our colleagues voted to uphold those bylaws, chose not to operate within the confines of the Home Rule Charter. And in terms of appointments, there's a couple tonight, and I guess I missed some last month. I know the Home Rule Charter specifically lots those appointments so that you can pick from your constituency, the people who live within your geographical locale. And so I see that that's no longer being done, which I think is a travesty. I think shame on anyone who can't find a appointment. We all represent about 40,000 people of the 280,000 residents. And so I'll just speak on me. Shame on me if I can't find an appointment out of 40,000 people within my geographical location, that I have to go outside of my district and pick from within another colleague's district to make an appointment. I just don't think that that's what the Home Rule Charter intended. But that in fact is what's taking place. And so under the bylaws of the Erie County Planning Commission, I'm required, as per their bylaws, to make my appointment from a list supplied by Erie County Planning Committee, townships and boroughs, I guess. And so after we voted, this body voted to, in fact, not operate within the Home Rule Charter on this instance. Then I requested the list, and I promptly received the list, the nominating list, a list of one, with one name on it for my appointment. I'm sure that person is a wonderful, caring, loyal, lovely person. But if they walked in here tonight and kissed me on the mouth, I wouldn't know them from a can of paint. But that's my appointment. So out of 228 appointments in 4 years that's been here, other than Councilman Brenneman's, who was leaving office and his appointments didn't fail, I seem to be the only one that has an appointment not be approved. And so I said some things last time I was at a meeting, and not to be incendiary or whatever, but again, I made comments on clips, and I asked members of this body to be mindful of the Sunshine Act. I said that it appeared that there was a block of votes and that things were being done differently. I kind of voiced that. And so I guess the rebuttal is I'm immature. Me, a 59-year-old grandfather of 8, father of 8, veteran, former trooper, former head of the NAACP, community leader, first African-American voted to any elected county position in the 220 or whatever year history of the county. And so I got 2 firsts that night, Mr. Lee. I'm a boy, basically. You can call a 59-year-old man immature, so you calling me a boy. So it's either ignorance or insensitivity or racially coded language from where I come from. That's totally unacceptable. And then this one was even better because I am the first to, I don't know if I should be proud of this one of acceptance or whatever, but I've never been referred to as part of a good old boy network. and stuff. And so I put my voting record up above the citizenship. And anyone can look at my voting record and see how that lines up. I offer it up to anyone to look. But to suggest that I'm a boy or impetuous in any manner because I raise up issues of fairness or equity or concerns, never resulting in name calling, I might say, which would be a sign of immaturity, juvenile. But I didn't resort to that. And so, all of that stuff really pales in comparison to the fact that there's nothing on this agenda or anybody's agenda, not our 3-year plan, not anything to address the plight of poor people. And so, and it's not enough to say we want a citywide LRTA and you don't explain to people what the citywide LRTA entails while we have 40 kids in a classroom, while we have unsuitable buildings in the school district, while everything that we're doing is supposed to build up this city, bring back our tax base. I guess it's addition by subtraction. We want to attract the millenniums in. There'll be home buyers. They'll lift up the tax base. We don't know what we're going to do with these other people that leave here and stuff, the ones we're balancing the budget on their back. But to do that, because we have a very declining tax base and we pay the highest taxes in the city of Erie and the region, to do that, we're going to give 10-year tax breaks. And I just can't imagine a scenario where a $600 million GAF site or anywhere else on the waterfront receives 10-year tax abatements while we have so many societal ills. It's budget time. People don't come and they're going to ask, and we're going to tell them we don't have no money. They don't go to the city, they ain't got no money. They ask the state, they don't have no money. I don't see a scenario where RACP funds should be used in conjunction with LRTA on prime real estate property. It's akin to the Commonwealth having the largest deposit of Marcellus shale in the world. We're the OPEC of the world, and we don't tax it while we have kids in Erie can't even hold a track meet in the school. Kids can't pass each other in the hallway. Any of you been up to Erie High while they're changing classes? You ought to go up there sometime. It's immoral to think that we would give away our tax dollars on our most prized pieces of property, and we don't bring anything to the table for poor people. So in my closing, I will say, out of 228 people, it appears I'm the only one who had a failed appointment. I will submit another appointment. I'll choose someone from within my district even, although that practice seems to be changing, also not in accordance with the Home Rule Charter. I will not, I'll abide by the opinion offered by the County Council Solicitor, Attorney Tallarico, in that I'm fully within my rights, as they are to vote it down or whatever, but I'm fully within my rights to select from within my district my appointment to Erie County Planning Commission, and I'll be doing so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Moving on to new business, do I have a motion to amend tonight's agenda to make second readings of ordinance number 121, 22, and 23?
So moved, and I'd like to include in it the appointment of Shamarski to the Home Rule Human Relations Commission under item G.
Advisory.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leon. Moved by Mr. Leon. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Anderson. Is there any comments regarding the amendment of tonight's agenda? Mr. Smith, roll call, please.
On the amendment, Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. Leone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lahl,
Yes.
Mr. Rastetter,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes. Second reading of ordinance number 121, please, in title only.
a second reading of ordinance number 121, 2018, 44th, 2018 Library Fund Budget, supplemental appropriation of $12,000 donation from the Friends of the Library.
Moved
Second.
by Mr. Leone and seconded by Mrs. Fatika. Is there any comment? Mr. Smith, roll call, please.
On ordinance 121, Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. Leone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lahl,
Yes.
Mr. Rastetter,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes. Second reading of ordinance number 122, please, in title only.
a second reading of ordinance number 122, 2018, 45th, 2018 General Fund Budget, supplemental appropriation of $4,261, PCOP Safety Improvement Grant.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Anderson and seconded by Mr. Leone. Is there any discussion? Roll call, please, Mr. Smith.
On ordinance 122, Mr. Leone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lahl,
Yes.
Mr. Rastetter,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes. Second reading of ordinance number 123, please, in title only.
a second reading of ordinance number 123, 2018, 46, 2018 General Fund Budget, supplemental appropriation of $96,992 for additional temporary staff, overtime, and travel expenses for Sheriff Department.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Anderson and seconded by Mrs. Fatika. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Leone.
there's only one issue, that, this is, part of this is funding that comes from the state. In fact, there's $1.5 million that they've taken out of this particular area in the state. I'm not saying we would get the 1.5 million, but it certainly is another one of those mandated services that the state is now requiring us to pay for. That's what it comes down to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leone. Any further discussion? Mr. Smith, roll call, please.
On ordinance 123, Mrs. Lahl,
Yes.
Mr. Rastetter,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. Leone,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes. First reading of ordinance number 124, please, in title only.
a first reading of ordinance number 124, 2018, amending ordinance number 94, 2018, creation of policy for disposition of grants to other organizations, funding from gaming or the general fund.
For a reading of, resolution number 49 in title only.
Resolution number 49, 2018, proclaiming September 25th, 2018, voter registration day in Erie County, Pennsylvania.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Anderson, you want to move that on the floor first?
Yeah, so moved.
Moved by Mr. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Leone. Discussion, Mr. Anderson.
Yes, I just wanted to, we're going to add on a proclamation for the entire week, having this the entire week of September 24th. The actual day of September 25th is the actual voter registration day, but council have all agreed that this is important enough to have this an entire week to inform residents of our community about the importance of voting. And Councilman Horton and I had worked on this, and I won't speak for Councilman Horton, but I certainly want to, and I think he will want to, thank E.J. Fike, Emmanuel Fike, who has worked very hard for us in bringing this to our attention and helping us ensure that we recognize this day and the week. And so I think he deserves some public recognition, and he's worked with us on many issues, including the community college and other things with Mr. Horton. And so we certainly want to give him his due and his shout out today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Horton.
I always enjoy when people shout words of encouragement and praise on my wards. I look at EJ more like a son. He performed as an intern for me, and he's done quite a bit of service for not just the citizens in the second, but for all the citizens of Erie County. In unpaid, he epitomizes what it means to be a true public servant, and he should be acknowledged. In regards to voters registration day, i.e. week, I am glad that we're celebrating it, and I hope that we would embody everything that's spoken about in the proclamation, and that we get up off of our do-nothings, and that we get out and that we encourage people to exercise their constitutional right, regardless of party, regardless of what side of any issue that you stand on. We're in perilous times, and as the chairman of the election board, which I'm proud to serve as, with everything from seeking ways to provide a paper ballot, or looking at other ways to safeguard our election, to looking for more ways to include the electorate, or making it easier for people who are eligible to vote to actually vote. And so this isn't just symbolic. It really is an important step in democracy. I would say that many things are wrong, and there are many things that we do right. But it all comes down to all politics being local. And a lot of times we don't vote in this off-year election, seemingly. But this is the proverbial election of a lifetime. And really, really pleased to offer up this resolution to support voter registration day and week. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, roll call, please.
On Resolution 49, Mr. Rastetter,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. Leon,
Yes.
Mrs. Law,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve the appointment of Rand Levis to the Erie County Hospital Authority?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Fatika,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Leon. Any discussion on that appointment?
Sure.
Mr. Horton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just interested in knowing, since it's such a hot topic here over the last month or two, and it's not listed on the agenda, whose appointment is that, and do they in fact live in the district which they're being appointed to?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Anderson.
I believe that's the county executive's appointment.
Usually if it's not listed, that's the case. I don't know that for sure.
it is. Hospital Authority belongs to the executive.
And I don't believe they necessarily have to come from a particular district.
Not if it's her appointment. Yeah, they don't. But that will be my narrative going forward. I'm just curious, because it was really striking to see 228 appointments and me having the only one that failed. And so I'll ask that question going forward: where they live? Where they live? Are they? Who's their council person? And where do they live? So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this appointment? Mr. Leon.
I don't believe it's only where they live, Andre. I also believe that, you know, the appointments that are being made, especially in these particular areas, seems to be all elite type of appointments. I mean, I'm being frank about it, and I don't think that the ordinary citizen is being represented. Unfortunately, we don't have any say as far as who's appointed in the Osborough Authority, but I think that they should have some, you know, when I go to the club every day, I see the guy that carries a lunch bucket. I don't see that as appointments on here, especially from the county executive's office. That's my comment. I don't have anything to say about who's going to be appointed there, but I think it's important to have some kind of a cross-section for the community, not just the elite.
Thank you, Mr. Leon. Mr. Horton.
Yes, and I'll piggyback off of that very briefly, too, because I do feel that way. It's why I made some of the comments I've made in the past. But I also feel that the appointment process, it really, I think that it really is designed for people who live in your district, or in those appointments that hold that requirement. As to this appointment or the county executive appointments, I don't see a lot of diversity in the appointments either. And so what it looks like a lot of times when all the dust settles and we throw words around like unprecedented cooperation from the elite to the poor, it doesn't look like cooperation. It looks more like collusion. And so it's my comment.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Smith, roll call, please.
On the appointment, Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. Leon,
Yes.
Mrs. Law,
Yes.
Mr. Rastetter,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve Ronald Sizmarsky to the Human Relations Commission Advisory Board?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Rastetter, second by Mrs. Fatika. Discussion, Mr. Horton.
Where does he live? Whose appointment is it?
Mr. Chairman,
You missed that.
Mrs. Fatika.
in answer to the question, we had a discussion. I had been without an appointment to the Human Relations Commission for almost a year when my previous appointment moved out of town. So I've spent that time looking for people, even putting something in one of the newspapers to see if anyone would come forward. I talked then at one point with Attorney Sizmarsky, who would like to serve with Human Relations, but felt that he didn't have the time for the commission, but offered to work on the board. Mr. Radstatter's appointment to the board wanted to and had the time to work on the commission. So with Mr. Radstatter's approval, I took his appointment from the advisory board, and this council approved Dr. Mary Jo Campbell for the commission. So that is why we went from one district to another, but we've got representation. In addition, with the advice of the solicitor, it came to my attention that for Human Relations Commission and the board, council does not have to choose within their district. So that's how this came about, if that answers any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Fatika. Any further discussion?
Just a comment.
Horton.
Yeah. Tonight and also moving forward, if, I'm sure they're wonderful, wonderful people, and there's nothing more than I'd like to do to vote and approve, but I can't with a clean conscience vote to violate the home rule charter. And so I'll be abstaining tonight on that.
Mr.
Well,
Chairman?
You can't abstain. You can
I'll
vote
be
yes.
voting no.
Yeah, okay. Mrs.
Mr.
Fatika.
Chairman, this appointment does not violate the home rule charter.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Anderson.
I guess I'm a little confused being a new member to council this year. But this issue, this reoccurring issue, and I respect Mr. Horton's stance for the position that he takes in questioning, and he certainly can question anything that he wants. I'd like some clarification, though, so I am no longer confused. As these board appointments have come down, some board appointments, there's no, they don't need to live in a district. Some, they say they do. My understanding is the Home Rule Charter says that the appointee has to be a resident of Erie County, period. So I'm not sure where the violation is if somebody's a resident of Erie County, unless specifically in that particular board, they specifically say that they have to be done by district. So I'm confused and would like clarification, so we know moving forward that it is or it isn't, or it isn't or it is. But, you know, having us talk about this and bring it up in the sense that some people are violating the Home Rule Charter while other people aren't, I think is something that needs to be addressed.
If I could, to cut debate, because we're just starting to go in a little bit of a circle here. All those things are articulated in the administrative code. Some boards and authorities, indeed, we have to pretty strictly follow the district representation, which, by the way, we could always vote to override, as this council was choosing to do early in this year. In general, we don't do that, and some you don't. And I would just suggest that before the appointments are voted on, if you are unsure of what the representation is, to just review the administrative code and vote your conscience accordingly. So if we could have the roll call.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Anderson.
Then I think it should be cleared that not in every case is it a violation of the Home Rule Charter. I think that's what you're stating. So it's not a cookie-cutter answer to that question. And so I would agree with you that each of us do have that responsibility to look at the administrative code and make sure we know. But we shouldn't be making a statement that every case is the same. So I think that should be cleared up to the general public. Thank you.
Not to be flip, but there is no cookie-cutter answer in county government. There just isn't. If we could have this as the last comment, please, Mr. Horton.
Thank you. I believe that the solicitor offered up an opinion on appointments and boards when the Erie County Planning Commission appointment came, and so it's probably, I think that all of council received a copy of that opinion stating that the Home Rule Charter should supersede any of that other stuff, and it spoke specifically to districts. But thank you.
Mr. Smith, roll call, please, on the appointment of Mr. Sismarski.
Mrs. Fatika?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mr. Leone? Mrs. Law?
Yes.
Mr. Rastetter?
Yes.
Wait till I vote first, and I'll give you the floor.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
I want to strike my vote. I'm sorry. Got ahead of myself. I'm voting no against that appointment.
Dr. Faust?
Yes. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Council stands adjourned. Good evening, everybody.